Welcome to the InvestFourMore Real Estate Podcast. My name is Mark Ferguson, and I am your host. I'm a house flipper. I flip 10 to 15 houses a year. I own 13 rental properties with a goal to buy 100 by 2023. I'm also a real estate agent. I've been licensed since '01. I run a team of 9. We sell close to 200 houses a year. So on this show, we like to interview house flippers, landlords, and the best real estate agents in the business. So stay tuned for some great shows. If you want more information on my rentals, on the numbers, how I buy properties, check out InvestFourMore.com. Hey everyone, it's Mark Ferguson with InvestFourMore. Welcome to another episode of the InvestFourMore Real Estate Podcast. Today I have a guest on who I've known for quite some time. He is very involved in the self-directed IRA scene, a real estate investor himself. He works with the iPlan Group and has been specializing in self-directed IRA investing for over 10 years. Also has his own rentals, his own flips. Mathew Tillack, thank you so much for being on the show. How are you doing?
Oh, you're welcome. I'm doing real good, Mark. Thank you for having me on.
No, I appreciate you being on and taking the time to share your story and what you do and give us some information on self-directed IRAs as well, which I know can be a confusing and complicated business investing out of those.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Well, I like to start. How did you get started in the industry? How did your story start out to get involved in all this?
Well, I was in college and I was finishing up and I actually put my resume on a career board type thing where self-directed IRA company had contacted me to, ask me to come in on, kind of like an entry level position. So I accepted it thinking it was just something to do until I finished my degree, but kind of turned out to a career for me where I started off, in customer service and worked my way up and then did inbound sales and outbound sales and then became a traveling sales rep. So I just kind of fell into it, but I really liked it. And I always liked the connection between the self-directed IRA industry and real estate. So I stuck with it because they were both a passion for me.
What was your degree or emphasis in college?
At business. Yeah. I did kind of a general degree. And then towards the end, I tailored it towards business. So that was what I was going for. Yeah.
Were you interested in real estate before getting involved with the IRA industry, or did that come from being in that industry?
A little bit of both. I was always interested because, I had family and friends that had done it or were interested, but definitely kind of spurred my interest working in the business because of how many people I met. When you work in the self-directed IRA industry, I'd say about 90% of the vendors you work with are real estate companies of some sort or real estate education platforms. So just kind of around it. You just absorb it and learn from being all around all these other great investors. And cool thing is you get to go to a lot of the vendor meetings and a lot of these like 3 or 4 day events and be a part of masterminds, but you're actually there as a vendor. So that's pretty cool too. So you had like an inside knowledge, if you will. It's really great.
What do you think stuck out to you the most from being around all these investors and all these people in the real estate industry that really drew you more into it?
Real estate investors are just a different breed. They really they're entrepreneurs at heart. They love the deal, putting the deal together. They love to take something and turn it into something greater, like a flip, for instance, or they just have that drive, so it's a different breed, I like to say. So that really attracted me because I find that that's me. Even though I work in the IRA industry, I love what I do, I also love real estate. And I think the two go together really well. So I see it. I just see those entrepreneurs out there putting deals together and being creative. I just love it.
Nice. And so how did you get started investing? What was the first property you invested in and when did that happen?
Yeah, that happened back in 2013. It's a rental. I still own it today. I had a virtual assistant just calling some like Craigslist ads for me for sale by owners. Picked it up for like $15,000, 15.2, something like that. Really, really inexpensive. I fixed it up. I ended up refinancing it and I did a lease option on the first tenant. Didn't work out. So I went Section 8 on it, and that tenant's been there for several years. And that property's cash flowing around $350, $400 a month right now, which in that neighborhood and for what I picked it up for is great. So that was the first one I did. I got really creative. You know how I bought it? Credit cards. I hate to say it, but that's how I got started. I do recommend everyone does that, but a lot of the rehab and everything, that's what I used. I mean, I bought it cash, but that's what I used to put the money into it, and then I refinanced. I did it smart though. I used the zero balance credit cards and then refinanced and paid them off. So again, don't recommend everyone start that way, but that's what I did. I made it happen.
Was that property in the Ohio area?
Yeah. It's in the Cleveland area here in Ohio.
Okay, I know people are going to be wondering, where can I buy a house for $15,000?
Yeah, no, and this was kind of a couple years ago before. I think the market started to pick up a little bit. This was back a couple years ago where you could still pick up some houses. So it's just really killer deals.
Nice. And I own a property in Cleveland. I didn't know if you know that. I own a turnkey in Cleveland. I've never seen it. I've never been to Cleveland, but I have a house there. So I'm glad to hear the market's doing better. It's
really taken off, I think. I've seen a lot of action out here.
Cool.
And solid rental place. I mean, I think I read somewhere it's like top 5 or something in the United States in rental. There's some really good areas.
Nice. Well, no, I'm glad to hear that for sure. So you bought the house for $15,000. What did you end up putting into it, and what did it end up renting for?
I think I put like 20 into it. I'd have to look back. I mean, not a terrible amount, but I got it rented for $795. But my mortgage is like 4, just a little over 4. So I mean, I'm clearing over 300 on that one.
Nice. I'm curious, one thing I've always heard is the difficulty in financing those low-valued properties. Did you have problems running into that, or did you find a bank pretty easily who would finance that property?
Good question. No, I didn't, because it was such a solid house from the start. It had really good bones that once I just, prettied it up a little bit, if you will, it appraised out where I needed it to. I actually got a conventional 30-year fix on that, and I did not have to go to one of those like banks that does rental properties. I've used those before too, where that's all they do. For me, it was actually pretty easy, but you also have to, you have to good financials if you want to get a nice 30-year fix. You got to have, pretty decent credit, and having a job doesn't hurt. And then, of course, having the property rented with a lease in place it puts you over the top.
Right. Nope, for sure. And what do you think that place is worth now, if you had to guess?
Yeah, well over 50. I think it appraised close to 70, believe it or not. But
oh, wow.
I thought that was a little high, but it, yeah. So, I mean, it's worth over 50 for sure.
Nice. Well, that worked out well for you. And after that first rental, it sounds like a pretty good success story. I imagine you got most of your money out that you put into it, or maybe even a little more.
A little bit more. Mm-hmm.
Well, how did your investing progress? Did you go for more rentals? I know you flipped houses as well, too.
Yeah, I just started flipping this year, but right after that, I went and bought a 3-unit, rehabbed it, used some of the cash from the refinance on the other one. And that 3-unit was pretty cool because I just sold it. When it was rented, fully rented, all 3 units, the net on it was about $1,200 a month. So after all expenses, I was putting about $1,200. I was putting over $1,200 a month in my pocket. So that's a really, really killer return. Same thing, bought it, fixed it up, got it all rented and refinanced it. And then the market where that was a really nice happen in town. I just put it up for sale at what I think was a very high price. I listed it at like $190 just to see what I would get. And we had an offer within 30 days, full asking price. So I sold that, put a nice check in my banking account, and I parlayed that into doing some more flips. I've actually got 4 other projects going right now, thanks to selling that 3-unit and making a nice profit. And I just sold another one. I just got an offer in today above asking. I had it listed for $189.9, and we just got an offer at $192, and that was for a flip I just did. And then I just bought another rental. It's almost done being rehabbed. I picked up another flip in a really trendy town called Ohio City here in Cleveland. That's going to be a really killer deal because I picked it up for $75, but ARV on that thing's about $250 to $300, just because it's a really, really trendy area. So yeah, so I just kind of keeping some rentals because I love the idea of building wealth, but I'm also gearing up to do a lot more flips too.
Nice. And how are you finding most of your deals? Are you still doing kind of the off-market properties that aren't listed? Or are you finding some properties on the MLS as well?
Most everything I've bought is either MLS or some of the auction sites, maybe like Hubzu or something like that, which can be very, very challenging and difficult. So, you got to have a realtor that knows what they're doing because they're hard to close on, especially with financing in place. But off market too. I mean, like the one I bought in Ohio City was totally off market. It just kind of came across my desk because the company that I borrow from on some of the rehab loans just brought it to me. I said, hey, do you got any deals that you know of? And he said, actually, I do. And so it just kind of worked out. Right place, right time. He introduced me to that seller who was a private seller, and I bought it. So I'm finding that the more I'm in the business, the more deals kind of show up. if you will.
No, that is for sure. And just asking people, like you said, it's amazing what people will tell you and find out. It's like, well, why don't you just keep that deal for yourself? It's like just so many people, they don't invest in real estate, but they actually know of people who are selling and getting great deals. It's amazing how that works.
Just worked out. The guy that was selling it just had too much on his plate. The lender's in the business to lend, so he didn't want it. So I took advantage of it. And I really feel that when it's all said and done, there could be a good 100 grand spread in this one if we do it right and do it real high end, just because of the location. So we'll see.
Nice. I'm curious about that deal. It sounds like there's a ton of room. Is it one where are you adding space? Is it just a complete gut? What kind of property is it?
Complete gut. It was already gutted when I bought it, so it's down to the studs. There was a little bit of fire damage upstairs, but nothing to scare me away. We had a structural guy come in. He already fixed it. So what was so attractive was it's already gutted. It's already down to the studs. That's like half the battle in my book. And here's the really cool part. It already had an open floor plan. So when you walk in, the first floor is completely open. Kitchen, dining room, living room. Then there's stairs off to the left that goes up to the upstairs, where there's a second floor, and it's only a 2-floor house with a basement. And it's a 3-2. But the really cool thing is if you walk around the corner, there's 2 new builds that went for high 2s, low, and one just went for low 3s. But I like those as comps because they're almost identical in square footage and the layout. When I looked at the one new build, you could see open floor plan, steps off to the left, 2 floors. It was almost the cookie cutter of the house I bought. So we're going to go real high end on this one and kind of push the envelope and see what we can do.
Nice. No, that's awesome. And yeah, you love to hear those high dollar profit margins for flips. It doesn't always happen that way. So no. Very cool. Cool. I know we want to get into the self-directing IRA side of it as well here. But before we do that, what are your plans or goals for the next couple of years? Are you trying to just keep flipping? Do you have a certain amount of rental properties you want to buy? Or are you just kind of going with the flow and seeing what happens?
A little bit of both. I definitely want to grow a really sizable rental portfolio. I'd love to get to 100 and then 200 and just really do that, but also do flips. And my goal in the next year is to double my volume. So, if I do 5 by this time next year, I want to have at least 10 deals going at the same time. And I've got friends that do it. I've got acquaintances and masterminds that do it. So I know it can be done. That's kind of where I'm shooting for.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah. Well, good luck in that. And I know you've moved pretty quickly for buying your first property in 2013 to getting to a point where you've got 5 deals at once. I'm not sure exactly the time frame, but 3 years later that's pretty quick movement in the real estate business.
Oh, good to know. And see, I was always thinking I was being slow about it. I need to push myself, but I guess that's a good thing, right?
Yeah. Well, you still have a full-time job as well, right?
Sure, I do.
Yeah. Yep. So, it's basically a part-time gig for you, which is pretty cool about flipping. If you do it right, if you have the systems in place and obviously contractors that work for you, it doesn't take all of your time to flip houses. That's for sure.
Exactly. You're there when they need a draw, and then the rest is just, hey, give me a report,
Very cool. So let's move back into the IRA business. I know you've been in this business a long time. What do you think are some of the most attractive things about IRA investing for real estate investors, people who are, maybe traditionally would invest in the stock market or in rental properties without their IRA? Can you give us a breakdown or a little bit of history on it?
It fits the real estate personality perfectly because, like I mentioned earlier, real estate investors, we're entrepreneurs. We like to take control and do things ourselves. That's what you're doing with a self-directed IRA, is you are taking your IRA, you're moving it over from maybe an old employer 401k or maybe an old IRA that you have somewhere. And what our investors or clients are doing is they're moving out of that traditional stocks, bonds, and mutual funds type of company, and they're moving it over to a self-directed custodian or administrator that allows them to invest into what they want to and what they choose. And it just so happens a lot of those types of people are real estate investors. It's probably 85-90% of what we see. But you've got these people that want to get out of the market and they want to invest into non-traditional things like private companies, or maybe they want to be a private lender to other real estate investors, or maybe they just want to buy rentals or invest into an apartment syndication. The sky's the limit. So I think that's the most attractive thing, is the level of control where you not only do you choose where your money goes, But typically these people are earning a higher yield because, for instance, if you loan your money out to a real estate investor on a rehab loan and you're charging them 15%, well, that 15% comes back to the IRA. And that's the second attractive thing of a self-directed IRA is as long as your income, all the income comes back to the account, you're not paying taxes on the profits. It's either tax deferred or tax free, depending on the type of IRA you have. So those are the two big things: control, and then your tax advantages.
Yes, for sure. And that property I bought in Cleveland, I bought with my IRA, and I had it invested into just, mutual funds, some REITs. It's just so frustrating for me personally investing in the stock market or even REITs because I have no control over anything that's done. It's basically you give your money to somebody, hope they do a good job, and that's all there is to it. And so when I could buy an actual house with my money, I'm like, I get to choose the house. I get to choose I used a turnkey company. I get to use the company. And it was just so much more fun doing it that way and having control than just blindly investing in the stock market, which I know, you can invest in the stock market in different ways, but I don't have time to research and figure out all the intricacies of that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Now, I know when I invested in mine, I ended up using cash to buy the property. It's like $45,000. I know there's a lot of different things to consider as far as loans and how you invest with a self-directed IRA. Can you go into that a little bit?
Oh, sure. I mean, there's a few different ways, and I think if we get into talking about loans, that's almost a conversation that we can have one-off with a prospect, and then we can even talk about the banks that loan to IRAs and maybe give you some places to look, and then you also want to bring in your accountant or your CPA or someone in that situation as well, because taking out a loan inside of an IRA is a completely different ballgame than buying all cash. And I'll give you, for instance, if you buy all cash, then all of your profits come back to the IRA without any taxes on them. Whereas if you go out and you use leverage, then because you use leverage, your IRA could actually owe a tax called unrelated debt financed income, depending on how much the leverage is versus your equity in the property, and also how much income the property produces. So typically not a deal killer, but it is a tax that your IRA has to pay because it used leverage. And then you have to have your accountant or CPA file a 990T every year with the IRS to track and record that and calculate the amount of tax you have to pay on your income from that property. So as you can see, using leverage and using no cash are totally two different ballgames.
Right. And then also, I know when you're buying with your self-directed IRA, I can't personally buy anything. It's the IRA that buys everything and would get the loan and all that. And like you said, finding a lender who will loan with an IRA, they can't offer a personal guarantee, or the investor can't offer that because the IRA has to buy it without their involvement, right?
Yeah, that's right. Very good point, Mark, because it does have to be a non-recourse loan. That's an IRS rule. And which means that, like you mentioned, the bank can only go after the property in the case of default. They cannot attach any liens to any of the other assets in the IRA or the IRA owner. And if you do that, if you did sign personally for a loan for your IRA, that is considered an extension of credit prohibited transaction. You can be taxed and penalized, so you don't want to do it. So there's only a handful of banks out there that will loan on a non-recourse basis to a property. But the good news is they're out there, and they do specialize in that.
Okay, cool. And yeah, I took the easy route and bought a cheap property for cash because of all that.
Much easier. Yeah.
What other things? Well, I know, like when you're buying a rental property in your IRA, can an investor manage that themselves, or do they have to have a property manager? I mean, there's so many different things going on with an IRA and the rules. Do you have any information on that side of it?
Sure. I mean, and that's one of those areas that can get a little gray, and I'll tell you why. Because it is your IRA. You can manage it. You can choose where the money goes and do your research on your investments and all of that. But you're not able to go and put any of your personal money into that deal. For instance, if your IRA buys a house, you cannot use your personal Home Depot credit card and go buy any supplies for it. So you literally have to keep your personal finances and your IRA completely separate. So an IRA owns a house. The IRA has to pay for the expenses from the IRA, which we would handle for you here at iPlan Group, where you just fill out an expense request and then we cover that expense. So similarly, if any income comes in, you have to make sure all that income comes back and is placed back into the IRA. you cannot be a conduit, meaning you can't take that rental check, deposit it into your business account, and then send it back to your custodian or administrator. That's a prohibited transaction. So you have to literally keep your hands off of everything financially and make sure all the money comes back to the IRA and that you don't use any personal assets, including physical labor, to go rehab that property or fix anything. So that's a hard thing, Mark, for a lot of real estate investors when they use self-directed IRAs, because a lot of them are so handy. They want to go do it themselves. They want to go fix that leaky sink, or they want to replace a window. And you can't do that with a self-directed IRA.
No, that's a great point, and something I'd never thought of.
Yeah. So to your question about property management, do you absolutely have to have one? Not necessarily. I mean, you could just have the renter send the rent checks back to your IRA custodian or administrator, but I do think it makes things a lot easier for you if you have a property management company in place, because it kind of gives you that buffer between you and your account. So there's a less of a chance of you doing something prohibited, like accidentally depositing the check into your personal account or fixing something and using personal funds when you're not allowed to. While it's not necessarily a requirement, it's probably a really good idea, I think, especially for the novice just starting out.
Right. Nope, that makes sense. And one thing, I had some money from my IRA because I used to invest into it when I was younger. I completely stopped investing in any retirement accounts myself because I wanted all that money going to my flipping, my rental properties, and I didn't want to be kind of tied down, not be able to use it for a very long time. Can you go into some of the rules on how long? I mean, because all the income, all the expenses have to go into the IRA. You can't, just take some rent for yourself, like you said. How long do people have to have that money in the IRA before they can touch it and start to use it?
That's a great question. So for all of the IRAs out there, you cannot start taking distributions from the account for personal living expenses or personal use until 59 and a half. That's when you can start to take the money out. So I do get a lot of people in that mindset that you just mentioned, where it's something off in the future. They don't really want to mess with it. But I think it's important to look at the pros of having one. The first one is there's 7 different account types. So for instance, I get a lot of clients that come to us around tax time and their accountant just wants them to set up like a traditional IRA or a SEP IRA for their business, because any money they put in there, they get a tax deduction on. So I can't tell you how many times I've had clients say, my accountant says I got to open up a SEP and I got to put X amount in it because we're going to try to drop me down a bracket rate or something on my taxes. So it's not just something that's a tool used for the future. You can use it as a tool right now, and it's very, very important. The other thing too is the Roth IRA. You can't beat starting one as early as possible, because you grow that thing. It's tax-free growth, so you don't pay any taxes on the profits. And then when you retire, you can also live on that money tax-free. So imagine starting off at 18 and growing a Roth until you're 60-something, and let's say you've got $1 million in there. You can do whatever you want with it because it's a Roth IRA. You're past retirement age. Now you can pull the money out tax-free. So they're really important tools, I think, to get started early.
Right. Nope. That makes sense. I still am not going to do it, but I like my liquidity and flexibility, but I understand why many people do it. I have a pretty aggressive investing style myself. So now, what about 401ks? If someone has a 401k through their, corporate job or whatever, you can work with those as well too, right?
Yes, we can. We can always roll over money from a 401k to an IRA, and then they can use that as like seed money almost to go do a deal or what have you, buy that first property. The only catch is if it's with a current employer, they typically won't allow you to move the money while still employed. You just have to call the 800 number on your statement and ask and see if you can do an in-service rollover or not. Generally speaking, the answer is no. So the 401ks that are really good targets for clients to move over are the ones from previous employers. So you've got somebody that maybe worked at Ford, they no longer work there. There's $100,000 in that old 401k. It's just doing nothing. That's the perfect account type to roll over into a self-directed IRA. Now it's within your grasp. You can control it and you can invest into what you want to. Real estate being a huge investment opportunity there.
Right. No, that makes sense. And one question I have too, I just thought of, do you have investors who flip in their IRA, their self-directed IRAs? Is that possible or feasible?
Not too often. Sometimes they do. With flips, though, you have to be very careful because if you do too many in a year, there's no cut and dry stance on how many. But if you start to really do a lot of flips inside of an IRA, the IRS can view that as inventory, more so like you're running a business. Almost so they start to view your account more like if you bought a company like a Subway franchise. And if you go out and you buy a business with your IRA, then you have to pay what's called unrelated business income tax. So if you do too many flips in a year, that is an issue. That's something to discuss with your CPA or your attorney. But keep that in mind. Have I seen clients do one or two here and there? Yes. But typically, if you own a property for more than a year, then it's not an issue. You don't have to be worried. You don't have to worry about them viewing your IRA as running a business. It's a long-term investment at that point. So in short, rentals, you don't have to worry about that. Rental income is exempt from any type of tax. And generally speaking, if you did one or two flips, you're probably going to be okay. Again, run that by your CPA or your attorney. But just keep in mind, if you really started to scale up and do a lot, that could be an issue.
Okay, that makes sense. And of course, the same thing, I'm sure, as far as doing work yourself on the properties can be an issue. I'm curious if it would ever be an issue, because it takes a lot of work to find flips and hire contractors and do all of that. Do you think there'd ever be an issue with people saying, you're doing all this work as a job? Or is that kind of the same thing as it becomes a business, what you were just talking about?
Well, I wouldn't worry about it unless that person was trying to pay themselves, which is not okay to do. That would be prohibited. So
okay.
You can't. So here's kind of like the line there. If you can make the investment choices and where your IRA is invested into, but the moment that you were to personally benefit from what your IRA is doing or try to pay yourself a fee as like a contractor, that's where it crosses the line into being a prohibited transaction. Okay, so one of the prohibited transaction rules is you cannot personally benefit from your IRA now. It's intended to grow your wealth for retirement, not for you to hire yourself as a contractor per se and pay yourself to go do work on the house now. Does that make sense?
Yep. Nope. That makes sense. So there's obviously a lot of intricacies and different things to watch out for when investing with your self-directed IRA. And transitioning to that, tell us about iPlan Group and kind of what that company does and how they help investors who want to invest with their IRA.
Okay, so iPlan Group we specialize in this. We are a self-directed IRA administrator. We're in Westlake, Ohio, and like I mentioned earlier, Mark, most of our clients are entrepreneurs. They're investing into non-traditional assets, so they're getting out of the market and they're taking control and they're buying real estate and things like that. So that's what we specialize in. You have to have a company hold your IRA for you. You can't do it yourself. So what we do is we hold the plan. We assist clients in establishing the IRA. We assist clients in transferring or rolling over money into it. So now that it's funded and it can be invested. And then once you find a deal that you want to deploy into, you call us. We tell you all of the supporting documentation that we need to see. We also explain to you how to properly title your documentation so it lists the IRA as the owner versus you personally, which is a really, really important point. When you're just getting started out, let's say you go buy a house, you have to make sure that purchase contract, the deed, the HUD-1, everything lists the IRA as the owner and purchaser, not the IRA owner. So we give you proper titling to list your IRA and all of that supporting documentation. We also have you sign authorization forms where you are authorizing us to send the funds out of your account and make that investment. And what we do is we review all that, all the signatures, all the supporting documents, and then we fund that investment for you. And then that asset is now held within your IRA. So for instance, you buy a rental property, your IRA owns that rental property. It's on the deed. If you're a private lender to another, let's say rehabber, and you do a note and a mortgage, your IRA is the lender and lien holder with that note and mortgage. If you buy a tax lien, your IRA owns the tax lien. If you buy shares in a private business, your IRA owns those units or shares. So we can basically do all of that for you. And then as you grow that account and as you manage your investments, we're there for you through all of that as well. So you got to pay an expense to a plumber, You request it, we send the check out. Money comes in, we take it and deposit it back into your IRA. You also have an online login. You've got a service team here you can call that will walk you through how to do your investments. It's a specialty type of account. So if you go to some of the larger companies, they're not going to allow you to invest into these non-traditional assets. We do. We're about 2% of the market. So it's a small niche, but that's what we specialize in. That's what we do in a nutshell.
No, that's great. And you brought up a couple points I want to talk on too. If you go to like a TD Ameritrade or a Merrill Lynch and you say, I want a self-directed IRA, they're going to tell you, you can't do that. I mean, even though you can, what they mean is you can't do that with them. They don't offer that account. That doesn't mean you can't do that. And I had that told to me too. It's like, well, you can't do that. I'm like, what do you mean I can't do it? And what they mean is they don't do that. You have to go to a certain specialized company like yourself to do it.
Exactly right. So, I mean, there's only 3 things you cannot invest into if you look into the code on this, and it's life insurance. So you cannot buy life insurance on yourself or someone else. Collectibles, which is like paintings, artwork, rugs, bottles of wine. So no booze. Comic books, baseball cards. So no collectibles. And then there was a letter ruling that says an IRA cannot be an investor into an S Corp. That's corporation. So life insurance, collectibles, S Corp. Typically everything else, if you can show investment documentation for it and list the IRA as the owner, you can buy it. So like you said, you go to them and say, I want to buy a property. They may have a self-directed IRA, meaning you can self-direct it into stocks, bonds, mutual funds. But you're 100% correct, Mark. They're not going to allow you to buy property or private companies or notes and mortgages. It's just not their bread and butter.
Right. And something else you mentioned too, there is a different process with buying a property because the IRA has to buy it. So I know working on the seller side, some houses we've had buyers buy with IRAs, and it's taken some time to get all the documents together. How much extra time do you think someone should allocate if they're buying with their IRA? Because you've got to send all the documents to the company, get them sent back and all of that on all the contracts, on everything.
It's going to depend on who you're working with and where the IRA is. I mean, there are some firms that can take a few weeks. We pride ourselves on being very fast and efficient. We're not the largest player on the block, but we do carry all the same insurances and things like that. So because we are a smaller self-directed IRA company, we can operate a lot leaner, meaning that most investments get in and out here within a day or two. If everything's correct and you get us all of your documentation before noon, our goal is to get that out same day for you. Now, to answer your question, how long should you give? I would say give yourself at least a couple of days, because generally speaking, if it's your first deal, there's going to be maybe a mistake here or there on the documentation. We need to notify you. You need to correct it. And there's going to be a little bit of go back and forth. So I'd give yourself a good couple of days. Now, here's the catch, though, is a lot of people get hung up when they're transferring money from another institution into a company like iPlan to do their investing. That's where the holdup can be, because I'm essentially powerless in how fast that other company can move money. So if you're funding your account for the first time, I suggest you give yourself a good 2 to 4 weeks just to get it all set up, get the account funded, make sure there's no hold on your funds, then go process your investment.
Okay, that makes sense. And one question too, let's say I want to make an offer on a house and I've got to act really fast to get a good deal. Does the IRA, does iPlan have to sign that offer, or can I sign for my IRA and then iPlan does the actual closing paperwork? How does that work?
That's a great question. So I know how we do it here is, as long as that purchase contract is in the name of the IRA, meaning you listed your IRA as the buyer, we are okay with the client signing the purchase contract only. And then everything from that point on, we sign. So essentially anything that is a closing document or anything that's recordable in nature, then we would sign on their behalf. But we've had quite a few clients that will sign the purchase contract themselves. They'll request earnest money check or wire from us. I mean, we try to be Johnny on the spot and get it out for you immediately, which we always do. And then you're good. You can move forward.
That's another good point. I didn't think about the earnest money. You'd have to have that come from your IRA account. So hopefully sellers will understand if it's your IRA buy and say, hey, maybe do a 3-day or a couple-day earnest money
Exactly.
Time frame to get that.
That's right. If you communicate that with them, Mark, I've never seen it be an issue.
Very cool. Cool. Well, that's a lot of information and some great stuff. Do you have anything else to add? I mean, if someone's looking, say they have some money in an account, they want to move it to a self-directed IRA. I mean, what are some of the main things they should consider and think about before they really get involved in doing that?
Sure. I say if you're kind of on the fence or it's something that might interest you, give us a call. You can go to our website, iplangroup.com. You can also go on there and set up a 30-minute strategy session. So either myself or the other business development manager here, Eric, one of us will call you and set up a time to talk it over with you, and we can send you additional information and get all of your questions answered and see if it's something that's the right fit for you.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for being on the show. I learned a lot. I learned quite a bit going through the process myself, but then, there's all kind of different intricacies and things to go on when you're buying from your IRA or funding it. So thank you so much for all the information. I hope you have a great rest of the week. And thanks again for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on, Mark, and I look forward to doing more business with you.
All right. Thank you, Matthew. Have a great day.
You too. Take care, Mark.